to the LLY, and the emotions brought forth by his song just make me want to cry. He's Solilicious. That's right, my little ponies. I have with me Soldat Pony here for an interview, and I'm sure we're all very, very excited. How are you doing today?
After that introduction, I'm doing quite well.
All for you, all for you. Definitely excited to have you on. This is an interview for the Film Music Tumblr, run by Freewave and Friends, and we're trying to sort of reach out and let our listeners and fans get to know the majestic men and women behind the music. So I'm really happy that you could join me tonight, and let's get it started. The question of the century, as always, is who is the best pony?
Oh dear. Do I absolutely have to answer that? I'm actually going to go with Applejack. Normally I would jump around a lot, but I'm going to give you a definitive answer right now.
All right, a solid answer for a very solid pony. I like. And what do you find about Applejack that evokes this feeling?
Well, for lack of a better answer, I identify with anything remotely Southern, and so I'm from Tennessee. For anyone who doesn't know, so immediately, I can relate to anyone who grew up on a farm, but I don't know, she seems a less obvious choice, and I'm always going to have to be a hipster, I suppose.
Of course. Well, let's jump into your musical background. I'd like to know sort of when you started playing music, if ponies were your first venture into music, or if you've done music before this.
I did music before this. I started playing guitar when I was 15, I guess, and I had friends who were very much into playing guitar for guitar's sake and practicing scales and new licks and stuff. And that can be fun, but very quickly I realized I was more interested in sort of writing music and just seeing what I could do as a form. And so all through high school, I just made songs in my basement whenever I would get home from school, and I would just make homemade CDs for my friends. Actually, it was once I was in college, I guess, that I decided I should start trying to put music online to see if it would be well received at all. So that's really how I ended up here.
So then, is there another alias that you have published and or continue to publish non-pony songs under?
No, not yet. There have been a couple tentative projects, but not quite launched yet.
So it's really neat to see that you're an experienced musician. Then see a lot of people come in and they're just inspired by the show, but it's always nice to have like really experienced musicians that can bring a lot of really technical work into it. You mentioned that you started off with guitar, and that's certainly your most prominent art form. But did you also have previous experience with the production and technical side of music?
Beyond figuring out how to do things myself, no. Just once I started learning how to play music and got interested in recording stuff and writing songs, I got some basic software, and I actually started on Sonar. I think it was Cakewalk 7, or no, Cakewalk Sonar 7 rather. And really I have no actual experience in mixing, but I would try to do things, and then I would go listen to songs that I thought were mixed well or that got a specific sound I was going for, and I would just kind of play around until I got it to sound right, which to a certain extent is what I still do. I never completely know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of stumbling through whatever program I'm using.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about your music is that you seem to be able to take something very organic and kind of folksy, just like the acoustic guitar, but then you add this wonderful layer of production over it all, and it's really, really fascinating. You kind of take it to a different level. It's folk, but it's really well produced, kind of modern folk. It's really fantastic to listen to. I've never really heard a whole lot else like it.
Thank you.
So let's talk about your first exposure to My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic. Do you have a brony origin story you can share with us?
Not a very interesting one, I suppose. It just was a matter of having a couple friends who were into it, and then they showed me the show, and I thought it was pretty cool. And I don't know. For about a year prior to my first releases under the Soldat name, I hadn't really made music. I was actually studying composition at university, so I was doing music sort of in another sphere. I was just sort of doing other things with music, so I hadn't really done anything like what you may have heard from me. But, you know, it was sort of, I was interested in getting back into it, and basically the show kind of gave me grounding, and it gave me, you know, sort of set themes or characters to play with, which, you know, sometimes with creativity, it can be really nice to have, you know, just one grounding point to work off of.
Yeah, I've often said Friendship is Magic provides artists, you know, musical, visual, whatever, with an excellent framework to work with, and it's really special in that regard. Is MLP the only, I guess, show or, you know, kind of external concept that you've produced music for, or have you also made like music for other fandoms or just other shows or books, characters, fiction?
In the sense of a fandom, no, you're right. It's just been MLP, and that I would sort of, I guess, chalk up to situational factors. It's just kind of where I was at the time, and yeah, I just sort of ended up here. I can't, I don't know, a bit serendipitously, I guess.
Well, for whatever reasons, we're glad to have you. Let's take a look back into the past. The first publicly published songs I see from you about My Little Pony would be Adagio and Moderato for cello and piano. Are these the first pony songs that you've made?
Close to the first, yeah. And they were based off themes that I had been playing with anyway. And yeah, and this was when I was still studying composition at university. So yeah, I was kind of in the mindset. But yeah, those were among the first things that I released.
And are they inspired by any particular fan works relating to Octavia, or is it just sort of Octavia as an elemental concept?
I would say the latter. A friend had shown me University Days, which kind of gave me an idea for the moderato. And partially because that movement, I'd kind of been playing around with themes of childhood and some different things anyway. So it really fell in nicely. But yeah, that sort of influenced where that piece went.
University Days is absolutely phenomenal, and definitely more than one artist has taken it for inspiration, including the wonderful Cherex Destructor.
Indeed.
And so then a couple other songs that I thought were particularly interesting, sort of singles that you've released, are the Stormy Skies over Equestria. That song's really neat. It has album art for Daring Do, but no really distinct vocals or anything. There's sort of some indistinct voices that I hear. Is there anything you can share about, I guess, how you came up with the inspiration for that piece?
That piece, that was one that I kind of been playing around with atmospheres and just, I was actually playing around with modal work, so it ended up being a lot of sort of Lydian and Dorian scales in E, which, you know, just suited the guitar really well. So, you know, musically it was kind of playing around, but yeah, for broader themes, I guess, yeah, once the, you know, just sort of the first little guitar licks came out, it immediately sounded rainy to me. And it, yeah, to me, it just sort of evoked this Pegasus's eye view of, you know, just a broad, stormy landscape. And, you know, the theme of sort of an explorer, an observer, daring do fell into that.
That's very beautiful. And actually, a really interesting point that I'm glad you brought up, the scales that you composed that piece in. So you actually relate the scale and the inherent nature of that musical mode to certain emotions or elements, which is wonderful. Do you often sort of approach it from a technical perspective first and then find what emotions are evoked through that? Or do you choose emotions, elements, and concepts and then try to find a technical scale to relate to those?
It's hard because I know enough theory that they're kind of closely linked in a way. Not necessarily, you know, like modes or scales in and of themselves, but I know what they sound like and I know what I can make them do. So oftentimes if I'm working through a piece, I'm not sure where to go. Usually I'll be away from the piece, I'll be on a walk or something, and I'll get an idea. So I can So, it kind of happens at the same time. I guess you might say it's sort of the emotion that comes first. I guess I know where it should go, and then I try to figure out how to, technically facilitate that. But yeah, they do kind of happen at the same moment. And when it comes down to it, if I'm trying things and they don't work, I'm just going to kind of keep jumping around until something gets the sound I want. But yeah, a good example is the white box music I've done, both the original theme and the score work I've done. The second act should be coming very soon, fingers crossed, by the excellent artist and animator, Mr. Nobody.
I'm deeply anticipating it.
Basically, the entire idea of the theme is playing with, the most basic theme is playing with this, with the Lydian mode, but then sort of playing with, this idea that modal riding is just essentially a major scale, but put in a different position. So it's playing with this almost like this sort of a mirror idea, is you have the same theme that fits exactly the same, or it fits into two different scales, these different modes, but in different places and, to different effects. So yeah, that, I kind of knew the fic and I knew what I wanted to do. And then I guess I got the idea later that this would be a good way to, get that sound I was going for.
Yeah, and I really like taking two different keys, a major C and a minor A both share the exact same notes. It's just a matter of perspective, and you can do some really powerful things with that. I'm glad you brought up the white box, and I'd like to get to that, but there's two other songs I wanted to point out real quick. First of all, Derpy the Red-Nosed Pony. This song is very deceptive. You did some very interesting lyrical work at the end and sort of called out the song on its hypocrisy, and sort of make the world question exactly why this song is drilled into the hearts of our youth during the time of festivities. I'll quote the line.
But Derpy, she did not go for that. She said, I see through your silly games. How can you look me in the face when only yesterday you called me names?
Excellent writing there.
I can't take credit for that for a second. That was from the Jack Johnson version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Pony, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So unfortunately, I can't. If I remember correctly, I gave him credit in the description. Maybe I forgot, but in any case.
Well, it was, at any rate, a very appropriate ponification to use Derpy as Rudolph there. And then another song, Molded in Clay, a song for Berry Punch.
Yeah.
What is it about you that won't let me be? I can't do without now. I'll never be free.
Can you talk about sort of how you decided to make this song, and perhaps maybe like the headcanon or just the themes that you chose to put through with this one?
Yeah, I mentioned this on a Tumblr post a couple months ago that this is like a lot of songs I've released, which is, that I had sort of a musical idea or say a chorus or a verse or something that had been floating around for years, but I'd never done anything with, or I'd tried things with and it had never completely worked out. That song has existed for years in, more basic forms, and the chorus itself, just a sort of basic idea, this very elemental image that I've had since I was probably about 16. But yeah, I've tried writing, verses and chord progressions. I've tried doing just loads of stuff, and nothing has ever worked. But then, yeah, there's not a much more specific headcanon than what's in the lyrics already. Yeah, I just kind of got in the mindset of longing and the idea of being stuck in a bar when you really would rather be anywhere else, but it's still better than the alternatives.
Right, and it all goes back to just the framework of Equestria and giving us a lot of really wonderful characters and material to work off of and extrapolate from. So then back to the white box. When Mr. Nobody approached you with the project, had you heard of the original fan fiction before then?
Well, it's actually funny because he, we've joked before that I always forget that this is the case because it's so much his project now, but he was inspired by my original sort of overture for the fic to start doing animations. And then when I saw some of the work he was doing, it was just, voiceover and animation, and I went to him and I said, hey, I can, do background music for this because I think it would be cool and I think it would add to the project a lot. And he said, yeah, sure, come on. So I technically started the project in kind of a roundabout way, but yeah, that's not to take credit for all the amazing work he's done with the animation and just organizing the entire project. And I'm really proud of him for, a lot of the work he's done on the second act, and because it was an ambitious, just by the nature of the progression of the story, it was kind of an ambitious space to try and put into visuals, but he's just done a really fantastic job with it.
Yeah, that's actually really fascinating. So you wrote the original theme for the White Box, but before the actual fan animation came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I forget that all the time.
Yeah, but the second act, don't sell yourself short, because of course the visuals are impressive, but so too the scoring evolving with the visuals and the emotion of the story. I think that you and Centrifuge did a fantastic job building up and calming down, as he's discovering the colors.
No, that's not quite right either. Outside is in a box because it doesn't have walls or a ceiling.
I thought I'd learned so much from this pony, but when she explains to me what outside is, I'm staggered. Colors had been one thing for sure, but no walls? No ceiling? That made no sense. Where would the colors go? Where would one write their name? What told the pony where they could and couldn't go? I relay these queries to Twilight Sparkle. Thankfully, she's now quite good at explaining.
Outside is nothing like the inside at all, Canvas. This here is inside.
She elaborates, tapping a hoof on the floor of the white box.
So I'm really excited
Outside.
for White Box Act 2. Get hype. Get very, very hype. And then moving on from these specific songs, you have 2 fully released albums and 1 teased album, Disharmony, Before These Mighty Skies, and Artemis.
You can see the world from here. Travel farther into the atmosphere.
Is Disharmony the very first time you sort of set out to put together a kind of a cohesive, collection of songs as opposed to singles?
To that degree, yes. I've always, like I said, I've always sort of collected songs and, given them to my friends. But then, in the end, it was always just more like, well, I have these songs, I'm going to kind of put them in an order that makes sense. No, you're completely right. Disharmony was the first time that I just said, I'm going to make an album that sort of makes sense and, actually has sort of an arc and where you ideally feel like you've gotten somewhere by the end of listening to it.
Right. And so was it then your original intention setting out to create a full album, or did it start off with a song and then maybe 2 songs and then sort of evolve from there?
I had a couple songs in that style. I had a Storyteller and Moon Cannon, and, those were pretty much just playing around with a form. And it wasn't until And the Rainfall told me that he thought I worked really well in that style that I thought, well, maybe I could actually, do more. So that was when I wrote Disharmony Part 1. I don't know, the rest of the album just kind of came from there. After he sort of convinced me that I could pull off more songs like that, I don't know, I guess it was off to the races.
Yeah, and it turned out beautifully and
well, thank you.
Very pleasantly different from the rest of your work. It's kind of gritty and there's very powerful percussion in there.
It's actually funny because I had the joke for a while that I had all these sort of light little happy folk songs, and then there's this album and no one knew where it came from. And basically until the time that I released Before These Mighty Skies, it felt kind of like there were fans of the old folk songs and there were fans that had shown up just from Disharmony, and I thought, not when I release this new folk record, there's just going to be this massive schism among people who follow my music because no one's going to know what to think anymore.
Well, I knew exactly what to think, and that is fuck yes. Moon Cannon is my favorite song from the album, closely followed up by Disharmony Part 1. And Disharmony Part 1 is particularly interesting because you have a guest rapper on the song.
Better yet, bring disorder in the court. This chord plays accordion, of course. Here's the weird owl of the ponyverse. Only worse, and his reign is a blessing and a curse. A blessing to the weird and chaotic and demented. A curse of the rest of the list not represented. Back in control like a gamepad. Making all the same mad, making all the insane glad. And it ain't bad. What's wrong with
What inspired you to approach Rhymeflow to lend his voice to the song?
Originally, as you can probably tell from the album art, the entire thing is sort of a nod towards Gorillaz, not exactly trying to emulate Gorillaz sound, but sort of with an eye towards Demon Days and Gorillaz, who I listened to a lot in high school and still for that matter. But initially the idea was that it was going to resemble the Gorillaz model a bit more, and that there were going to be rappers on other tracks. It was actually just at the very end that Be Cool didn't have a rap section on it, and I pulled out a violin and did that pizzicato section in the middle to just sort of fill the gap. That was kind of the reason I got Rhymeflow on that track. And also, there's a section in the production where I felt like that sort of breakdown should happen, but it felt empty and I didn't really have any more lyrics I wanted to fit in there, so I asked him if he wanted to contribute to that track for a charity album, and he said yeah, totally.
Yeah, it came out beautifully. Are there any other bands that have influenced you, or maybe you try to emulate or at least nod towards?
Too many. From I suppose further back, I would say like both Gorillaz and Coldplay. More recently, you could say people like Sigur Rós or Andrew Bird, the big one. Yeah, I have a lot of musical influences, and I don't know, at a certain level I feel almost nervous saying who they are, because then people go find them and realize who I'm ripping off on a song-by-song basis.
How about within the fandom? First of all, did you listen to any Pony music before you decided to make your own, and did that sort of at all influence you in your decision to sort of take that route with your music?
Not a ton. I had heard some, but I don't know, I hadn't heard any that just really inspired me, so I just kind of jumped in essentially. And basically it was then that I met some lesser known artists and people whose art I really respected, and the Rainfall's a big one, and Eccentrifuge for that matter, SoGap, and then guys who I got to know later under the Story 52 project.
Let 100 flowers blossom. Don't attempt to save them. Let X be a sovereign. We can only find it.
Like Bass Explodey and Freeway, guys that whose music I just really respect greatly. But yeah, that didn't really come until later. I had to sort of delve a bit deeper into the community to find them.
Yeah, well, you definitely have picked a choice crowd to associate with. More than even being inspired by them, you have a few collaboration songs. Broken Horn was done with Griffinilia/Sherclop Poems.
Dripping in sweat, claws in my back. I couldn't save her, I couldn't react. She was my nectar, so golden and sweet. Now I'm just alone with a broken heart.
Was that your first collab?
No, it goes back to, I guess, fall of 2012. I did a collaboration with Eccentrifuge called Manhattan Mornings.
Maybe I'll cry like that song I sing. bird, that songbird, one morning, one more.
Which honestly I think is where it all started in a sense, because I think that's where And the Rainfall first heard me, and then he invited me to Story 52, which is where a lot of people first heard of me, and then after that I released albums and I ended up here.
And speaking of the man himself and the Rainfall, you've actually gone a step further and formed a band with him. And pronouncing it right,
Tecolotl? You would have to ask him. I speak languages that are not Spanish or any sort of native Central American language. So Don can come correct me on that. As a band, sort of a dual project. He did choose the title, and I was fine with it. I suggested some stuff, but then he suggested Tecolotl, and I was fine with it. So I went with that. But it's very much a dual venture on the tracks themselves, and I know it's just interesting because we both really respect each other's music, but we're also very different, the two of us. So it's I don't know, it's not necessarily an easy or an obvious marriage, if you will.
Right, but some very interesting things have come out of it. Is basically exactly what I would expect from you two. It's got, And the Rainfall is worked with synths and in your awesome folksy acoustic guitar. But then you have Pony Waifu, and that is a real treat to listen to, but certainly a departure from really what I would have expected from either of you.
Fair soft as feathery down, while I still look into such trust and bigger for life. That makes my poor heart burst with glee. Please promise that it's true, that you would deign to choose me.
What's the story behind that? When did you decide to make that cover?
In a way, I think we had talked about doing stuff together before then, but we both like Rainbow Dash Presents, and so I watched that and I messaged And the Rainfall and I said, we need to do a cover of this song. And he said, okay, I'll watch it. And then he watched it and he said, yeah, we're going to do a cover of this song. So,
beautiful.
So I insisted on doing sort of the smooth jazz version of it, and then that happened. It could have, in theory, had I just, if I just wanted to do it myself, it could have been a much more, I don't know, it could have sounded much more like a lot of my stuff, but then Dawn added a lot of instrumentation to that, and it really helped out, I think.
Yeah. The last collab I have knowledge of is Eternity with Hackamore.
Can you tell me about the world in my dream? All the prophecies and morals that you like to new extreme. I can't take myself. It's a curse like nothing else. A gift you gave to me. I'll survive eternity.
Where did that start?
I knew, not knew that well, but Julian had kind of spoken to me through YouTube comments and stuff on some of my older videos. And so I just got a message at some point saying, hey, I really want to collab with you. Can you help me with this song? I said, yeah. So that song was fully formed already, lyrics and all, and I just really dug it. So I just recorded vocals and sent them off. So that was the most painless collaboration probably I've ever participated in. But yeah, I think it came out really well, and I just really enjoyed the song.
Absolutely. And then the second album that you've released, Before These Mighty Skies.
Strong is your hold, oh hold, hold me up until I breathe into my epitome. The best of me is yet here to behold. The best of me is yet here to behold.
That takes a very artistic approach, sort of in the title of the songs and the actual art that comes with each of the songs. Is there any purpose or mission that you were trying to accomplish with this album?
It's kind of funny because I have a very specific sort of headcanon for that album, but I don't really, necessarily want to. I didn't want to force that upon the listener. I kind of wanted people to be able to make their own meanings and sort of figure out what the album meant for them themselves. So that's part of the reason I did the mystery art project, where I went to artists and said to my friends, I said, "Hey, here's the song, here's the lyrics. I don't care what you do, because I know your art and I trust you. I'm sure it'll be good. Just whatever this means to you, do something with it. I don't care what characters you think this is about. I don't care if you invent characters you think this is about. I don't care if you make something that looks happy or sad. I just want to see what this means to people that aren't me." And that's kind of where the art project came from. But yeah, I had never, in the same way that I had just never done an album before, Disharmony, I had just never, cohesively taken folk songs and put them into an album. And I don't know, that was just a big, not exactly obstacle to overcome, but it was just sort of this, I don't know, it was just sort of looming on the horizon. And I felt like the time was right in my musical development to tackle that.
Yeah, adding the art to it was a whole new level of dynamic in a way to experience the whole album. And I'm really glad you did that and reach out to them. And very, very exciting to know that each of the art was not at all influenced by any preconceived notion that you thought what it should be, but an individual interpretation. That's a very, very beautiful way to go about it. But this perhaps is an opportune time. Would you be willing to share with us your specific headcanon of the story that this album tells?
I won't get too into detail, but basically the idea is that you have a wandering pony, and in the first song, basically, he has sort of an out-of-body, spiritual, if you will, experience, and kind of is forced to look at his life and sort of start wondering about things, so he just starts wandering all over Equestria. And the album is essentially about people, or ponies rather, that he meets, and just sort of growing psychologically and emotionally, and kind of attempting to reach a place.
It's really beautiful, particularly track 5, La Maison Errante.
Comment es-tu devenu comme moi? Et pourquoi ça m'échappe? Tu flottes, les nuages, ils ne sont pas ce que j'imagine les enfants.
That seems to have an interesting positioning. My quick trip to Google told me it translates to finding home or something along those lines.
The wandering home, actually.
Wandering. So he wanders home in the middle of the album, as opposed to maybe at the end as a way to resolve it. Can you expand or elaborate just on that particular choice?
Yeah, actually, La Maison Errante, that I will share that tiny, bit of headcanon. For me, that was actually, looking at a cloud home, whether it belonged to a Rainbow Dash or, another Pegasus. And the idea was sort of this self-examination, like this wandering pony who didn't necessarily have a purpose or a home, and then you see what's something that's generally considered to be solid, or standing still, like a home. You're supposed to always be able to go to this fixed place, but then it's just sort of this idea of almost being in awe of, well, you're just like me. You kind of float wherever the wind takes you, but that doesn't make you less of a home, or that doesn't make you less what you are.
Oh, that is absolutely beautiful. And very interesting that home doesn't necessarily refer to the wanderer's home, but another pony's home. Thank you very much for sharing. I wanted to highlight that, not only because of just how it struck me as interesting in the middle of the album, but also because it is proudly flagshipped upon your Tumblr. And so I felt like there might be a deep significance that, and I'm very glad you shared that with me. Finally, you have begun a project called Artemis.
Yes.
One song has been revealed so far. The album art suggests it's about Twilight Sparkle.
As I'm getting old, I'll carry the cold away. For the last few forevers, couldn't fill the space. Inside my books are old ideas and days that never will be and never keep their place.
Is there anything that you would like to share about the album and what it means?
Yeah, that album, I specifically only posted one track because, well, both my previous albums, took a long time to put together. And, just at a pragmatic level, I don't really want to, make people wait that long to hear new music from me. So there's that. But also, I kind of like the idea of forcing myself to, sort of work with a story arc. Once I've written a chapter, essentially, it's just out there. I don't get to write the whole thing and then edit it. It forces me to, be a bit more careful and put more thought into what I'm doing as the story's moving forward. But yeah, you're right that the first track is about Twilight Sparkle. The whole thing isn't. Actually, the next track is going to come out very soon. Depending on when you release this, it may have already been released. Yeah, the next track is actually about Rainbow Dash. It's called Space Mare, so that's coming very soon.
Hashtag get pumped.
But yeah, it's I'm just kind of shaping a story, and I don't know, if I had a couple more tracks, already laid down, I could probably tell you more about exactly where the story's going. But since I'm still figuring it out myself, I probably won't say too much, lest I, contradict myself in the future.
Could it possibly be a main 6 album?
That's the idea, yeah. And I don't necessarily want to lock myself into that for fear that I'll get through the main 6 and still have something to say. But, my intention is to, after Rainbow Dash, the Fluttershy song's coming. So yes, that's the concept, at least.
All right. And what significance does the name Artemis have in the context of this album?
It's interesting. I'll leave that to the listeners to try and decipher, although I will tell you the actual word Artemis has nothing to do with the story itself or a character or anything like that, and it has everything to do with who Artemis was as a mythological figure and what she stood for.
Well, it will be a pleasure trying to decipher it, and very excited to be taking this journey with you as opposed to just sort of it all dumped on you all at once.
I thought that would be a nice way to go for, like I said, both because listeners get music a bit more frequently, and then I don't know, I get to play with this idea I've never tried before, this sort of this serial album, if you will.
Right. I was going to ask, are there any albums, I know you have a lot of musical influence, but particular albums that have stood out to you as models for a cohesive structure that ties a lot of concepts together or tells a story?
I would say Sufjan Stevens' Come On Feel the Illinois is a big one. As anyone who knows that album and has listened to it before These Mighty Skies can probably tell. I would say there are a lot of albums that I look at, for that sort of thing. But yeah, generally it's bands who at least have sort of an idea to tie together. I would say Tak by Seguros is another big one. Or, also Valtari influenced my last album a lot. And probably the first, like you were saying about Gorillaz, like sort of being the first band that you got yourself into. In a way, the first singular album that I personally got myself into was Vive La Vida by Coldplay, which partially because they were doing some really new things given their old music with their sound, but they did make a real effort, even though they were trying some new stuff to, even on the sort of the B-sides, the songs they didn't use that came out of those sessions, they have sort of this running theme and this sort of atmosphere surrounding the album, and as a result it basically feels like a journey. But once you've finished it, which is I don't really care if people listen to my albums and think, oh, that was this specific story, but what I do care about is that people listen to the albums and then by the time that they're done, they feel like, they've gotten something more out of the music than they would have just listening to singles individually.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely am glad to hear that aspect of constructing an album is important to you. I think that albums can be so much more than collections of songs and excellent devices for storytelling. My particular favorite albums would be The Wall by Pink Floyd.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. I also really liked 2112 by Rush.
Right on.
It tells a very fantastic story. And I want to argue that Demon Days by the Gorillaz also tells a story, even if it's a little less obvious than other concept albums.
I'm with you there.
So, onto a lighter subject than the philosophy of storytelling through music. I hear that you like wine.
Well, you might have even heard earlier where I sort of not clanked my glass on the coaster accidentally. So, I mean, if that tells you anything about my normal evening, then yeah.
And tell me, how has your love of wine influenced you as a musician?
That's that really nice Hemingway quote, which is "Write drunk, edit sober."
I can get behind that 100%.
Yeah. Can I say definitively that wine or alcohol has influenced me as an artist greatly? I don't know, but I have gotten some, what I feel are some pretty good themes or lyrics written when I've been a bit under the influence. And I mean, you obviously also have to go in and know how to edit after the fact, but just as a creative tool, sort of your removal of inhibitions can be useful.
Absolutely. What are your favorite wines?
Favorite wines? I like really, really dark reds. So Pinot Noir, generally. My personal favorite is, it's actually just called Reds, which is written in, sort of Soviet script. It says a wine for the people under it. It's just dark as night, and I love it. And it actually, the first time I tried it was a year ago when some friends got me a bottle for my birthday. And yeah, that's my personal favorite. Other than that, I just like whatever is cheap and decent.
Wine being perhaps a fairly important part of French culture, French seems to be very prevalent throughout all of your music. How did this connection with the French language form?
It's funny because I speak a bit of French now. I spent some last summer in Quebec, so I am just basically speaking lots of and sort of learning French. But yeah, when I chose the name, I did not speak a word of French at all. It actually, the name came from L'Histoire du Soldat, which is a piece by Stravinsky. It was sort of a quasi-ballet, but it has a spoken part over it. And it means the soldier's tale, and it's about essentially this wandering soldier who keeps he keeps running into the devil, who keeps kind of leading him astray. And it's a really wonderful piece of music, but yeah, it's also sort of a story I enjoy. Some people don't like the spoken part over the music, but I do. Yeah, so it's a little funny that now I can speak French well enough to, at least write a song in it, but when I chose the name, I knew none at all.
Do you have any sort of personal connection with the story that is told, or does it just strike you as a well-told story?
I don't know that I have personal connection more than anyone, because, we're all just kind of wandering around trying to figure out what we want to do. But when I picked this alias, it was always supposed to be a character. I figure, because, when you write songs, you're not just, they're not all autobiographical. All art that one makes is at a certain level. But, generally you're kind of putting on an artistic character through which to communicate a message. And, that just seemed like a character that I could get behind and sort of do stuff with. And, so in that way, Before These Mighty Skies is really kind of a year and a half in the making, I guess.
Yeah, that really gives a whole new way to look at Before These Mighty Skies. Thank you very much for sharing. So would you say that you've sort of modeled the character Les Soldats after the story told by that piece?
In a way, yeah. I would say mostly it's the most basic story that I've taken, and then I guess there I've kind of run with it. I don't know. Sorry, it pains me a bit to say that because to me it sounds a little bit like visiting a Stravinsky story, which came from an old folktale. But yeah, I guess it's what I do with a lot. I guess with the show in general, which is like I take a basic idea and then I think, ooh, I could have fun with that, and then I see what I can do and see if I can turn it on its head and twist it around.
Is there any other particular characteristics of Les Soldats that you've sort of constructed or envisioned for her?
Other characteristics? I don't know. In a way, I'm kind of letting a Comic Kit decide that. They told me there's apparently a comic forthcoming, which, just made me wildly excited. I completely adore their art, but, I'm really open to interpretation for that, honestly. Because, yeah, that's one of those things that I sort of purposely leave open, say on Before These Mice Guys, beyond things that we all sort of feel like longing or uncertainty or what have you. That's one of those things that I kind of, I might have my preferences, but I'm completely open to others' interpretations there.
Yeah, I love it when a mythos is sort of crafted around a band or a character. Obviously, both of us being fans of Gorillaz, Pink Floyd, Rush, even Metalocalypse, Death Clock. I really like kind of delving into a fiction and a universe created around a character. So definitely excited for that. That Comic Kit is a fantastic artist.
Comic Kit has already done a couple of just really cool pieces for Soldat, and so worst case scenario is those already exist and you should go find them because they're really lovely. At least I think so.
Yeah, and also between Face Explodey and Null, there's the wonderful comic where they're both in the orphanage.
Yes. Oh yeah, and the Seaside Slumber comics too.
Yeah, and Face Explodey with the Space Ponies, Night Glider and Friends.
Yeah. Very cool.
It is so fun to watch this mythos evolve around, all of you guys. Yeah. It definitely adds, good. It adds good to it. It adds good to everything. Everything is good. Touching on something that you mentioned earlier, purpose of both life and wandering around, I would like to ask,
oh dear,
what is the purpose? What is the purpose of music, and particularly your music? What goals do you have for your music?
Music and art in general, just, kind of make life bearable. In my opinion, it's, are they, obviously they're not necessary in the way that, say, like medical advancement is necessary, or, I don't know, living in modern society has some form of organization and government, however lax it may seemingly be, is necessary. People need food and people need shelter, and, people need to be kept healthy. But then, without art, there's, I don't know, I feel like you kind of lose the purpose of being, or without art, there's not as much of a reason to be healthy or to have shelter. Those times when you are, I suppose, content, or those times where you are taken care of, if you don't have art, then at least for me, there's not much of a reason to live. Which in a way is in a sense, it's a bleak way of looking at it, but I don't know. I don't know that I can say what the purpose of my art is in a very general sense. I don't know. I believe kind of adamantly that art is, it's communication, which means that it's not just about what I think. It's not just about what I want. It's what other people get from my music. So I don't know, if one person says that they get this emotion out of a piece of mine and another person says something completely different, and both of those ideas are completely different from what I was trying to say, if those people are moved by their interpretations, who am I to say, no, you're wrong, the meaning, the emotion that you get from this is wrong. That's ridiculous. For music, it's just as much about the listener as it is about the musician. And that really came out, there were some people commenting on Beautiful Discord for a while, which I feel like that's an interesting sort of piece to start a conversation on, because it's sort of ethereal and drifty and dreamy. So, there's not, I don't know, it's not the most definitive emotion, I've ever put into a piece, but I've really enjoyed listening to what some people say they get out of the piece for exactly that reason. I just love hearing about and reading about, what people really get from music I create. And, and it honestly makes me happier when people depart from what I had, initially thought of, because that means I've done something that's multifaceted, which, means that more people could theoretically be affected by that art, which is really, at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to reach people.
Yeah. And Going back to the purpose of art as to make life tolerable, would you say that sort of by a transitive way of looking at it, is the purpose of life to experience art?
You could say that. It's hard speaking from a 20th, 21st century perspective because I've, never lived a day-to-day, I hope I can find food, like sort of existence. I've been very privileged, so I've always had the benefit of being able to take in art. So I have no way of imagining life without art. But I mean, yeah, that's also kind of the point is, living in a civilization where we have transcended, at least we're trying to transcend for everyone this sort of, this constant
Struggle to survive, perhaps?
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, obviously, there are still people who heartbreakingly are still living in, dreadful poverty or, under oppressive governments. But, generally we do sort of have those moments of contentment between, say, look at most of the Western world where, you get home or you get back from classes or what have you. And even if it's late, you have some time before you go to sleep and before you get up and go do, your practical things again where, you're just kind of there and you could sit there and ponder life, which is fine in its own sphere. But if there's no art at all, then, what's supposed to take up that space? I don't know. In hindsight, this all sounds very bleak, but I don't know. I feel like just as humans, it's kind of what we do, and it's kind of not necessarily the reason that we've, evolutionarily progressed, but it's definitely, from about as early as you can call us humans, it's shown up. And I feel like it's just as human as anything else, as any organs in our bodies or as any, innate behaviors.
Yeah. Would you say then maybe the purpose of life is to give life purpose through art?
I don't know. Saying life has a singular purpose like that is a big statement. And I don't know, that's kind of why I guess this comes back to, I guess I can identify with the soldat, with the soldat, the wandering soldier, because, I don't know, it's kind of big to assign, a singular purpose to life. But, in a way that's kind of scary and, in a way more comforting and just, easier and more reasonable to say, you know what, I want to do this. This would make people happier, so I'm going to do this. And that's kind of what I do with my music is, am I going to change lives? Probably not. But, there are people who, when I release a song, it makes their day better. And, in the big scheme, if you have lots of people doing that, that does kind of start to make a difference. And, that does, is there one big purpose for that? Maybe not, probably not. I don't know. But basically, I'm doing something I enjoy, and it seems to bring happiness to other people. So in a certain sense, that's my purpose, I guess.
Right. And you bring up a very valid point. It's a big statement, and it's also a scary statement to assign purpose, because what if later on down the line you find you're wrong,
Yeah.
perhaps change your mind? That could put you in a very interesting position. Do you have a favorite form of artistic media, be it poetry, film, visual arts, music, or literature?
Do you mean to take in as opposed to create, or?
Let's go with both.
Well, I like taking in all art. I probably understand both literature and music better than anything else, I would say. So I'm kind of partial to those. Yeah, as far as creation, I'm in this awkward position where I've been writing a lot of poetry lately and a little bit of nonfiction, except I feel like logically I'm probably a better composer. I'm probably better at creating music. So I don't know, that's the tiny identity crisis of the day, of the year. But yeah, there that is.
Well, now you've got me really curious. I want to read all of your poetry. One last deep and philosophical question.
Oh dear.
Are the characteristics of having swagger codependent on one's self-perceived swag?
I would say yeah. I would say if you want to have swagger and you think you have swagger, that is the definition of having swag.
Is it possible for one to have swagger without knowing that one has swag?
I think so, yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think that one can indeed give oneself swagger by, just should I quit while I'm ahead? Also, the biggest stumbling block for me here is the grammatical distinction that's being drawn between swagger and swag. I'm not sure what it is.
It is a very ponderous distinction between swagger and swag. I view swagger as a physical expression of one's elemental swag. Swag being
okay. That's a useful distinction. Also, probably a logical one. And can I also talk about how swagger is an excellent word? As in the actual verb meaning a certain type of walk. It was such a perfect word to describe, that action
and that attitude.
Yeah, exactly the attitude too. But and then it was commandeered by pop music. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like you could say I think therefore I swagger in the sense that if one perceives oneself as having if one perceives oneself as having swag, then that person thus has swagger. I do also believe, though, that a person can have swagger without being aware of it. However, if someone tells somebody without swagger that person has swagger, then that person's swag goes up even though they didn't previously have swagger because they now perceive themselves as having swagger. Thus, I'm actually not even sure what that conclusion should be called, but I'm just going to leave that.
Well, we've reached a ontological paradox here, because knowing that one has swag bestows swagger upon oneself. Mm-hmm. But if one inherently has swagger without without knowing of their own swag, where did said swagger come from? See, because we've defined a source of swagger as one's self-perceived swag, but the fact that one can have swagger without having self-perceived swag begs the question, what other sources of swagger are there?
This could indeed be a semantic problem, considering that I believe that one can have swagger and be confident in oneself without necessarily knowing of the term swag or swagger, or even, consciously understanding that, their outward sort of the appearance they give off of, being confident. So I feel like you could say that the confusion of sources of swagger could have a lot to do with, I don't know, you could even say a generational gap regarding, lexical definitions.
Yes, but if it were to be taken as sort of an elemental concept that transcends language.
Is that what swagger is now? Okay.
Yes, we're still left with an ontological paradox. The source of swagger other than self.
Oh, other than self? It does seem that swagger is dependent on the other, actually. Because take someone who believes that they have swagger and then have somebody tell them that they do not have swagger. This does not inherently mean that the person whose swagger has been called into question will take the hater's message to heart. However, in such a manner, just as somebody bestowing someone a compliment could give someone without swagger, you could say in the same manner that someone with swagger could be convinced that they do not have swagger. So actually, I think therefore a swag is not correct, because swag is completely dependent on outward perception.
Well, I think that I'm glad that we've cleared that up. I will rest easier tonight than the easierness that I have rested.
How long have we talked about this? It's been like 10 minutes.
Yeah, about 10 minutes.
Oh.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I feel oddly fulfilled.
Well, with that feeling of fulfillment, there is one last question.
Okay.
And this comes from a very close friend of yours.
Oh, God.
And the Rainfall wants to know exactly how gay you are.
I feel I shouldn't answer this too hastily. Really, if most people ask me that question, I'm not completely sure how I'd answer it. I'm going to not exactly answer, but I'm going to present another question, and that is, and the rainfall, how gay do you want me to be?
And with that, I believe that we are out of an arbitrarily set amount of time. Listen, thank you so much for coming on and tolerating a 10-minute discussion on swagger. I'm really, really happy to have had this opportunity to talk with you and delve into some of the deeper meaning behind your musical projects, and I look forward to seeing how Artemis evolves over time. Is there anything else you would like to let the world know before we close?
Not really, actually, but thank you for having me. It's been fun.
All right. Well, stay pony, my friends.
You as well.
Confess to me your full-hearted dreams, the things you find you're fond of. Tell me your every wish. I think that I'm in love.
You know that I love you too. You feed me sugar cubes. Can't say what more could I want. I am your pony waifu.
I'll be there for you every night.
I will be there too. You are my very best friend, and I'm your pony waifu.
There you are, the light of my
I
life.
know that we'll get through.
You're everything that I need.
Pony waifu,
I predict the future for us,
gonna make it shine.
because you know I'm yours.